The female sex drive is mysterious and much more complicated than the male sex drive. I'm going to link in the description of this video an interview that Chris Williamson did with Roy Baumeister, a social psychologist at the University of Queensland and an author. And this was from about a year ago. They made an interview called The Mystery of the Female Sex Drive. And that's where he was talking about research which shows that women's libido diminishes after bonding with the male and after children are born. And that's why I made that video yesterday, which I'll link, let's see, up at the top, about two non-fixable factors in your marriage that make a woman lose sexual desire for you. I got that from that interview, and I think it's definitely true. Now, what can be done about this? Some men are going like, oh, what are we going to do? Well, let's remember that monogamy is a social construct. Throughout human evolution, we were not monogamous creatures, okay? So women, I suppose, by having many sexual partners kept their novelty. I do not know how this worked because I do not like when guys just fuck me, pump and dump. But I think maybe when they lived in tribes, these people had relationships with each other, or maybe they didn't like it. I really don't know about the, I'm always very curious about the emotional aspect of these women who just had all these male partners. Didn't they feel like traumatized by these guys just fucking them and running off? Or were their emotional centers less developed that they didn't mind? Because animals don't mind, and as we become higher functioning social creatures, we do mind. Or maybe they're just, I really don't know. No one ever talks about that. And also when we talk about women being selective, they didn't seem that selective back then. In fact, the selection criteria in early human biological history was through the man's penis. It was the man's penis with the mushroom-shaped tip, which would last for like 4 minutes before he ejaculates, and that would pump out the semen of the other men in the vaginal canal, and the semen quickly coagulates. But there's something, yes, so that will pump out the semen of the other men. So there's a biological, if you look at, different primates, and you look at the way that the penises are shaped and the bodies are shaped and the size of the testicles and the quality of the sperm, you will see that throughout human history, we made it. A lot of males made it with a lot of women. What about the emotional part? That's what puzzles me. No one ever talks about that. And how could we? We probably don't know. Now, people in that video were also asking me about how to keep novelty in a relationship. And also some men were saying, well, I'm not just a hookup guy. And some guys, I think it's Ken of Ken, he has many relationships with many women, and some women do like being friends with benefits. So how do we explain that? And so I made a little graph for you guys, a little chart called sociosexuality, where this is low sociosexuality and this is high. Sociosexuality means your willingness to have sex with a lot of people. And for women, okay, so we have bell-shaped curves. Like you can't say all women are like this and all men are like this. We're different, okay? So we have a bell-shaped curve. So for women, we're more towards the left side of the scale of sociosexuality, whereas men are more on the right side of the scale. So there are more men that are, in general, men are higher in sociosexuality than women, but there's some women higher than some men. Okay, so we differ in our sociosexuality. Yesterday I was watching a YouTube video about a couple that, were coming on to admit that her sex drive was much higher than his, and they've been married over 10 years. He likes sex every 3 days, and she likes it once or twice a day. And how they came to terms with that, and it took them 10 years of marriage before he finally admitted to her that his lower desire in sex had to do with his own body, self-image, and that he just didn't have that urge for it as often. So you can't always say that men want sex more than women. We're generalizing here. How to introduce novelty into your relationship. I just think that some people just have the strong sexual chemistry in their relationship. And a lot of times these people get divorced because the rest of their relationship sucks. They might have a lot of fights. They don't agree on things, and often they get divorced, but sex was always good. Okay, so some people just have this magnetic attraction. And there have been a few times in my life that I felt the strong sexual attraction to a man that I had just met, like intense, like a fire burning in my body. And I once had a friend who told me about this guy that she was dating, that, and she was in her late 40s at the time. She said of all the men she'd ever been with, this guy was the best. He was a total loser of a boyfriend. He was unemployed. He was just a loser. But she said his penis felt like a lightning rod in her. His penis just always felt like electricity filled her body every time he entered her. It was only this guy. No other guy would do it. And she was multi-orgasmic with all these guys, but just this one guy's penis. So I do not know how we can explain how some people have a very strong sexual attraction to each other. And I do not know if that sustains or not. But for some people, it can sustain. They do like a lot of flirting with each other, and they keep that sexual energy alive, and they just have this attraction for each other. Some people just have a higher libido. If you have two people with a high libido, they may not need that much novelty, okay? If both people like sex, they're going to be in the mood for it more often. If they have this special chemistry together, if they have a higher libido. These are just, my own thoughts. However, if you don't have the special chemistry, and I think few people have it that can last through, more than 5 years, but some people do. And if you have a regular sized libido and you're getting bored with your spouse, the only way to get novelty back are things that are going to make you uncomfortable. It's almost like you have to go into like withdrawal of feeling secure with your partner in order to get the novelty back. Because in the beginning you have novelty. Esther Perel talks about the known versus the unknown. Okay, the known, people want familiarity and security and trust, but the unknown, the adventure, the passion, the newness, the excitement. When you first meet someone, they're unknown, so it's all very exciting. And then they become familiar, and they're not as exciting anymore. So unless you have a high libido, or you're a man who just wants to ejaculate, it's not going to be that exciting anymore. Even a man can lose some desire for his wife. Like my ex-husband would always tell me, I've known you so many years, you're just not that exciting anymore. And I can totally see that. But in my late 40s, I got into this high horny phase, as many women do. But in general, unless a woman goes into that phase, you're stuck with this. So how do you bring novelty in? You have to take the familiarity out. You have to take the comfort out, and you have to be willing to have novelty and excitement. How do you do this? These are my own ideas. One thing is space between each other, separateness. The husband goes off for a trip and comes back. It's exciting again. The woman takes a trip with her girlfriends and comes back. It's exciting again. So time apart in the workday. If you're joining each other's hips all the time, I do not know how couples who work together from home maintain their sex life. I do not know. The space, time apart, number one. And a lot of people don't want a week apart. Time apart. Number two, how do people introduce novelty? Swingers are very good at this. How do they do it? By watching their partners have sex with other people, by having sex with other people. And they always say when they come home at the end of an event, they're so much more turned on for each other. It increases the desire for each other. This can also happen when one partner is traveling and you're wondering, are they fucking someone else? And a woman's desire can be boosted by her thinking that her husband is fucking someone else. Now, this might make her jealous, this might make her uncomfortable, but it boosts the libido. Also, owning that you're a sexual creature, and this is also related to the jealousy factor that some people might experience. When I interviewed DSO, the author of The Dead Bedroom Fix, I don't know if it was in his book or in the interview, he did talk about it's very important for a man to own that he's a sexual being, that he finds other women attractive. You do as a man, and when you hide it, you're being inauthentic, and you're going to kill the energy in the relationship because you're lying. You're fucking lying. You want to fuck other women, or at least you find them attractive and you want to look. So he and his wife just have this very open appreciation for, oh yeah, she's hot, you know? And so it kind of keeps that sexual energy alive, and it lets the woman know he's a sexual being. And for the woman to let the guy know, I'm a sexual being, that allowing the sexual energy into the relationship instead of, I love you and I want only you, which is a fucking lie. Okay? So being authentic in that way. Another way to increase the novelty is taking a risk. Again, like I'm saying, people don't want to do this stuff, but you take a risk. And what kind of risk do you take? You take an emotional risk by revealing something about yourself sexually, a fantasy, a desire. You're willing to try something new. You're taking a sexual risk in your relationship. Or you take another kind of emotional risk in your relationship by doing some shadow work, by looking at some parts of yourself that you've suppressed. And then you emerge a whole new person. When you become a whole new person, you show up differently in your sexual relationship because you're not the same person anymore. I was watching a video the other day, an interview with a woman who had worked through some repressed childhood sexual trauma. It was called Believe Me. It's her book. Yes. And I think she was already married when she went through this. I'm not sure, but she said she just cried and cried and cried and did all this catharsis while she was writing her book. And then she noticed all of a sudden all the colors seemed brighter, everything in life seemed brighter, and she's so happy with herself. But before, she didn't know what was wrong with her because she had all this repressed stored trauma. And a lot of people don't want to look at their trauma, but until you do, you will just be repressed. So you can, when you do work on yourself, it can bring in some newness. Now I'm a new person. Now I feel different. Now I am different. I'm going to show up different. I'm going to experience you different. And along with that is like being very present in the moment and seeing your partner as a new person every time, rather than like, oh, this is how we've always done it. Some people don't need that much novelty, especially, if men are like, oh, I've always liked it this way. And they can be happy, especially if they have a high libido. They can be happy doing it the same way every time. But women are more likely to get bored. We're more likely to want novelty because we're like in it for the adventure, and we're emotional creatures. In the video, he also talks about how by a sexual desire for men is more influenced by nature. So a man, whatever he likes at the age of 20, he'll also like at the age of 50. It's not very likely to change. Whereas a woman's sexual desire is mysterious and changeable and impacted by the culture. So when women move to another country, they take on the sexual culture and mores of that new country that they're in. A woman's sexuality is more impacted by religion, by her education. More educated women are more open sexually, and by her age. As a woman ages, her sexual desires and openness will increase. She becomes more sexually confident. Also, a woman's sex drive is more malleable, also influenced by the hormones. So the sexual tragedy is that a man is never satisfied with how many partners he has. If given the option, he would want more and more and more, but he's kind of like programmed into this, monogamy thing, whereas a woman's diminishes after bonding and after childcare. And that women use sex appeal to get men because they use their sex appeal to get men because they need resources, and men produce the resources. So they just get to be chosen. But I don't think that applies that much maybe in our current society. So in other words, if people want to maintain like a really interesting sex life, I think they also have to look at the impact that religion had on their upbringing. A lot of people have a repressed libido because of what they were taught by religion. And it's really hard to undo that because you know that Jesus is watching and God is watching, and you're bad for liking it and you're bad for doing it. And that's all in your subconscious. That's going to influence you. It's going to make you be like, oh, I can't be myself in the bedroom. I think people, if they want to have novelty, they have to be really comfortable with their sexuality. And this is something that I sometimes struggle with myself because I was raised in an era where women were not supposed to like sex. We were supposed to, like, virginity was prized, and men would not respect women who liked sex. And that's still, like a little bit in the back of my mind. Like, if I were dating a guy, I've had a lot of sexual experiences, but even when I was married, I was always thinking, I shouldn't like it too much because then he will disrespect me. So we have to be able to let go of all of that when we're being sexual and just get into our animal spirits. The other thing too, though, that I struggle with in all of this understanding about many penises and many vaginas and we're not meant to be monogamous is, what about the kids? What about pregnancy? What about attachment? None of these authors ever mention any of this stuff. None of the men writing these books ever talk about this stuff, that pregnancy can result in children. What about the children? Sex can result in pregnancy. What about that? And that women are more selective because we bond to these guys also. The emotional component. None of these guys ever talk about that part. And, I, as a person who's very pro-family and who, is a mother and a grandmother, all these factors are something that I think about because history aside, I don't want to hook up with a whole bunch of guys. That's not in my heart. That's not in my heart to go around hooking up with a bunch of guys or being friends with benefits to a lot of guys. And I know that some men are saying they have women who are friends with benefits. I don't understand that. I don't understand how they can do that. If they're just higher on the sociosexuality scale, perhaps. If they're just emotionally wounded and don't think they deserve a securely attached partner and that they're somehow unhappy with this arrangement. Who is raising these children? Who is raising these children that result from these sexual encounters? Or, that's something that I think about as a person who's more family oriented. These people writing these books seem to be very oriented towards sexuality, but what about the children? Who's raising these children? They don't ever really seem to talk about that. Now, in ancient times, when women were breastfeeding, that set up a natural 4-year period where they could not get pregnant again because their fertility cycle stopped during breastfeeding. But now, that is a factor. And as humans have evolved, we've brought more emotional context into our relationships. Also, monogamy, while it's not our natural state, is better for society. So we maintain monogamy because it's better for society. Finding all these new sexual partners may have been easy when we lived in tribes on the prairie. But I can't even find, last time I looked for a hookup guy, a few years back. It took for a long time to find someone I was willing to hook up with. And then after that time, I stopped doing it because I felt very traumatized by the whole thing. But, he was sweet to me. He was not mean to me, but it's not for me. But it took me so long to find one person. So I do not know how these people were always finding someone to hook up with, because not that many men are men that I would want to hook up with. So I do not know how people find all these friends with benefits, all these relationships, because I'm just so selective that, and that has served me well because my children all turned out very well. I am going to go on a limb and say that my style of attachment and bonding and having sex and choosing men has served me well. If I look at all the children that I had and the lives that they have and the stable life that I had, the monogamy and the attachment system around family and around children has served me well because I have good results to show for it. And women who just sleep around with a bunch of guys who leave them behind, they have very difficult lives. It's very difficult raising a child on your own. They have very difficult lives. It's very difficult for the children as well. It's not good for the children. It's not good for society. But maybe some of these people who are higher in sociosexuality are more, primal or animalistic, or maybe they're just not as evolved. I really don't know. I find it very puzzling to me. It's very puzzling to me. But, I think that we have to hold space for things we don't understand and different kinds of people. Anyway, if you want novelty in your relationship, you have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to be willing to spend time apart. You have to be willing to make the other person jealous and to be jealous yourself. And you have to take emotional risks by doing personal development and risking rejection from your partner by exploring new ideas, revealing new parts of yourself, trying new sexual things. You have to be willing to lose everything. That's how you keep novelty, and that's how you had novelty, because you didn't know who you had. They were unknown to you, and they have to be unknown to you again, else it's not novel. And the only way I think that you can circumvent this is by either having a lot of different partners, but again, that's the jealousy part. The only way you can circumvent it is if you happen to be with someone where the sexual chemistry is very high. Other parts of your relationship are going to suck. Okay? That's usually the case. You can't have the all perfect relationship. The sexual chemistry is very high because you either have that chemistry or you both have a high libido. So you don't need the novelty to keep it exciting because you just have a high libido anyway. And then in that case, you don't have to worry about the novelty. That's what I think, but I want to know what you think. And thank you for watching my video.